Second part of today's session, March 3rd, I believe, is about Africa. Uno-san wrote a book about Africa, and it's in Japanese, so I didn't really...
Yeah, skip all Japanese, and
right.
I prepared all English YouTube.
Right. So actually, I didn't come across YouTube yet, but I did look up some of my own YouTube movies that I would like to take a look at.
In this case, you insert YouTube in my book.
Okay.
And I'm going to later, I just view it,
Right.
and prepare the word,
Okay.
translate it,
Right.
and add comment
Right.
later.
Okay.
So if I can do that, you can show the much more better understanding for audience for Africa, right?
Okay.
If you're going to separate, you just lecture, but in future I can't use it. This is going to be useless. And also I'm going to prepare for the YouTube, today's lecture. If you're going to put in my book, this is useful, for I just later I'm going to, okay, you can study my book, right?
Okay.
This is my objective.
Okay.
And Africa is a very interesting area.
Africa is a very interesting area.
But Wednesday night people, they have no interest. So that's, they are very interested in Israel. I don't know why.
Israel, そうね。いや、でも、秋元さんtooでしょ?
Yeah. He had better join the Wednesday night, because Wednesday night is Israel.
I don't know what's going on with Israel, but not only Kimoto-san, but I also have some other friends who are currently they're visiting Israel, and I don't know what's going on. Is there anything happening between Japan and Israel?
Oh, Israel and Japan is two countries, is a peculiar country in the world. Weird. Weird. Yes.
Fellow nerds.
Yes, very different people. And Israel cases, many countries hate Israel, but very special. Japan is a different meaning, special. Two countries in the world, very different, very difficult to understand.
I see.
Who are they?
So they are more or less condemned to each other.
Yes, so he's just devoting for Israel. Good answer. If she familiar with Israel, he can get friends from Israel, he get rich.
Israel, of course, like economic power is strong. Their backing from the U.S. is strong.
Oh yeah, of course.
And they are well capitalized.
He has a special talent. He focused on Israel, but right answer. If you're going to close to Israel, he got rich. I tell you, he got rich.
Well, I mean, one of the very good things is that in terms of IT, the technology startup scene is very well developed and very well capitalized in Israel. So there's a lot of startup money in Israel.
Do you know why?
Because of the basically they're just like maybe the Chinese. They're kind of connected.
No. They need to survive. That's the reason why they spend a lot of effort to how to survive their race. So especially IT and agriculture and many military, some weaponry, sort of things they're making devoting for those areas for their survival.
Right, but when we're talking about Kimoto-san, then his primary interest is IT, right?
Yeah. And agriculture.
And agriculture.
Agriculture.
And agriculture and
Very advanced.
and
They are very advanced.
and
Other people think so. Very confusing.
Right.
This situation.
it's going everywhere. They should trying to find. Okay. So now we were talking about Africa, and when we are actually, I was prior to starting and reading your book, I was doing a little online research. I was very interested in Africa as a kid. When I grew up, Africa was the poorest continent in the world. The poverty was rampant. There was a big challenge, and I felt inclined towards dedicating to do something about poverty in Africa. that was one of the big challenges at the time that I was growing up. But time has passed, and the situation in Africa is already rapidly changing, even though the world doesn't really seem to take notice that much. Just like you said, we are not interested in Africa, even though there are a lot of changes. There are a lot of challenges, but there are also a lot of changes. If we look at the poverty numbers today compared to 10, 20, 30 years ago, we see that the situation is changing rapidly, but the world doesn't really seem to care. Now, to understand a little bit more deeper about what happened with Africa, I tried to look at some historical material. And
did you?
Yes. But actually what I find is that when it comes to history, there was very little attention for Africa before 1800, basically. Basically, the general opinion about Africa...
Before colonialism.
Before colonialism. Before colonialism, most people were not interested in Africa at all. They were barbarians. They were savages. They didn't have any culture. So basically they were of no interest. There was no colonialism yet. There was, maybe with the exception of the Southern Cape, which was not really colonialism but more settlement, to support the international trade with Asia. But basically there's very little information. And I found the same to be true, for example, when you're looking at statistics and research. In university, I wanted to write a thesis about Africa and African development, but there is so little information was available in the libraries at that time that would be a huge challenge even to find any data, let alone write a coherent thesis. So I changed my perspective and wrote a thesis about Eastern Europe. But I started to read about the colonial period, and that's very interesting. And later on, I think we will come back to that to understand a little bit more about Africa, about colonialism. What I did find also is that I had a lot of misconceptions about colonialism and about what drove colonialism. For example, by the French in Africa, and how these things went and what it actually meant to be colonialized, and what impact it had on Africa itself. So that is something that we will add later on as a layer, as the way that we're going to approach this series is to follow Uno-san's book and go through it step by step. And as discussed before, I will try to add the things that I learn outside of the book, about the things that I'm currently reading, my own experience being in Africa for a year, and hopefully it will be added value to what you have written about Africa already. So let's get started. Looking at Africa today, and this didn't really change that much actually over the past 30 years. Looking at the world map, and this is a image from The Economist, looking at the stability of nations, stability of nations. We see that Africa has a lot of red countries, red meaning very fragile countries. We see Northern America stable, Japan stable, Australia stable, but Africa has a lot of red, yellow to red areas, and hardly any greens actually, if any green countries, so that it's a very unstable continent. Still, that didn't change. So Africa is still not stable, and it is still in stages of development.